Happy Thursday and welcome back to the Brittany Hughes Show, everybody. I hope y'all all have your Christmas shopping done and are preparing to spend a very relaxing weekend before Christmas Day with your families. Of course, that's not usually the case in our household. We're kind of one of those that, you know, we get most of our Christmas shopping done like before Thanksgiving, and then we sort of put off the last little bit until the very, very end, and we're running around like crazy people on Christmas Eve trying to like scramble for the last few things that we've forgotten or that maybe we've thought of at the last minute. It happens every single year. It doesn't matter how much I tell myself this is going to be the year that I'm going to be one of those people that has everything done and wrapped by like the beginning of fall, and then I'm just not going to have to worry about any of it. I'm going to watch all the other crazy people go nuts right before Christmas. And I say that every single year, and it never actually ends up happening. So if you see me out and about on Saturday running around like a mad woman, just know that's par for the course. Everything's fine. I'm going to be totally fine. If that's you, we're in it together. We're going to be okay. We're going to make it to Sunday. Everything's going to be fine. And the kids are going to be happy either way. You just need to remember that. That's what it's all about, right? But obviously, the American people, even amid rampant inflation, if your town is anything like mine, it doesn't look like the American people have run out of money to spend, or at least a lot of people out there window shopping with the dimes that Joe Biden has left in their pocket. You know who else hasn't run out of money to spend is Congress. And by money, I mean yours and mine. And if they run out of that, I guess they'll just print more and inflation will continue to skyrocket. But, you know, Congress never, and I don't care whether you're talking about Democrats or Republicans. Democrats tend to be the more spend-happy party. But to be quite honest, I'm not really sure that Republicans are much better, because as much as many people on the right like to talk and give lip service to the idea of cutting back spending, I'm seeing an awful lot of right-leaning Republican politicians that are supposed to be on the side of smaller government who are more than happy to sign off on these massive spending bills that just chuck money out the window like it's off of a Monopoly board game.
At least in the Senate, I can tell you that the vast majority of senators, they talk a good game on fiscal responsibility, but it's like going to heaven. Everybody wants to go to heaven. Nobody is quite ready to make the trip.
And I'm not really sure what the American people get for it. I don't remember the last time that I woke up after a spending bill was passed and I thought, you know what? It's a good thing we've spent all this money. The world is brighter and happier and shinier. Look at all this stuff that we have. There's no Christmas morning for taxpayers when it comes to all of the garbage that billions upon billions of our dollars get spent on every single year. And this omnibus bill was no exception. So even as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was traveling to Washington, D.C. this week, where, of course, last night he gave this big speech where he, requested more money for Congress. He did so in kind of a, I think he probably spoke more directly with President Joe Biden than he did before Congress. Of course, he thanked U.S. taxpayers for the tens of billions of dollars that we have already given his country, including money that was in this most recent spending bill. And so even as he was standing up in front of a joint session of Congress asking for even more money for his country during their crisis, during their time of war, that same Congress, which controls the money that they siphon from us at federal gunpoint, was busy passing a massive 4,000 plus page spending bill that nobody on planet Earth could possibly be expected to read in any reasonable amount of time. And it included billions more to Ukraine and more pork than a Hawaiian barbecue. This thing was chock full of so much trash. So if you know anything about an omnibus spending bill, if you know anything about the way that Congress spends money at all, it's not like, okay, well, here's how much we need for our military, and here's how much we need to keep the White House running, and here's how much we need to pay the president, and no. That is not what spending bills are. That might be what a spending bill should be per the United States Constitution, which of course has basically been used as toilet paper by the vast majority of politicians in Washington, D.C., on both sides, I might add. That is what the federal government should be doing. It should be allocating money judiciously and responsibly to the things that the federal government has been given purview over via the powers enumerated in the Constitution, which actually are very limited if you look at them. But that's not what's happened. The behemoth that has become the federal government has become so wildly bloated that now we're passing 4,000 plus page spending bills that nobody's going to bother to read, especially the average American. If the people that are being asked to vote on this stuff aren't reading it, no American is actually sitting down and going through all of this. So it's really, really easy to just sort of stuff things into a bill like this when you know nobody's going to notice it, nobody's going to read it, and you start talking about trillions of dollars, which is such a mind-boggling amount of money that it starts to make smaller things like $1 million here, $5 million here, $10 million here, $100 million. It starts to make all of that sort of look like chump change, like that's not real money that's being taken from you and me. Like that doesn't have to actually be earned by the American people before it can be shoveled over to the federal government. Courtesy of the IRS, which is now going to have a whole bunch more agents who are going to come after you if you don't pay it. So again, you start to almost lose the ability to fathom the amount of money that is being spent on junk stuff, to the point where most Americans just go, you know what, that is above my pay grade. I am working my job. I am dealing with my family. No way am I going to read this 4,100-page bill. So whatever. You want to spend $1 million on something, you want to spend $10 million on something. Most people don't have the capacity to even notice. And I think that's by design. I think that's where we've gotten in this country, where these politicians understand we're talking about so much money. We're talking about such giant pieces of legislation. We can put whatever we want in them, and nobody has the time or the energy to care. Well, I care. I care that this bill totals $1.7 trillion of my money and your money. That's not fake money. That's not money that just came out of the ether. That's our money. So consider this. The median U.S. salary in 2021 was $69,717. The Omnibus spending bill, that $1.7 trillion spending bill, is the equivalent of the total annual salary of 24,384,297 people. That's how many people would have to work at a median salary of about $69,700 to fund this massive spending bill. That's just one way to try to put this massive amount of money into perspective. And here's what Congress is spending it on. Check this out. We're going to read some of the things that are in this bill that nobody's ever going to read, including the people that are going to be voting on it. Woke crap. Woke crap. That's what I have entitled this category. Just a giant category of woke crap. By the way, what I'm about to read does not encompass the totality of said woke crap. These are just a few examples that I sort of picked out of the giant pile up. Here they are. Here we go. $477,000 for anti-racist training from the Equity Institute. Anti-racist training. I almost don't want to know what that means, except that we're spending almost $500,000 of our money on it, which apparently Congress thinks is important. Don't see that anywhere in the United States Constitution, by the way, that we're going to allocate money for anti-racist training. But apparently Congress has decided that falls under their purview. $3 million for the LGBTQ plus museum in New York City. $3 million. $1.2 million in services for DACA recipients. DACA recipients, you'll recall, these are the some of the people that President Barack Obama amnestied back in the day, even though that wasn't constitutional at all, even though he didn't actually have the power to do that. The Dreamers, the DACA recipients, these are illegal aliens that should not be in this country in the first place, but on top of everything else that we have given them, we're going to give them $1.2 million in services, courtesy of the American taxpayer. $26 million for the House of Representatives Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Did you know that they had one? They do. And now they're getting $26 million. For what? Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know, to fund some bureaucrats who are unelected, who sit there and make up gobbledygook all day and do thumb push-ups on Twitter or something. $26 million. $108 million for environmental justice at the EPA. Environmental justice. Justice for the environment? Whatever. $8.6 million for gender advisor programs at the Pentagon, because that's what you want the Pentagon to be concentrating on, right? In the middle of, I don't know, record low recruitment rates and global unrest, you really want the guys at the Pentagon and all of the top military guys, you really want them concentrating on gender advisor programs at the, to the tune of $8.6 million. Oh, this one's fun. This one's fun. 575 million for family planning in areas where population growth threatens biodiversity. This is an actual quote from this legislation. I'm going to read it so you get this. Not less than 575 million should be made available for family planning / reproductive health, including in areas where population growth threatens biodiversity or endangered species. Let me translate that from congressional leftist speak. 575 million of your dollars to go towards promoting abortions in places where we think the human population is getting out of control because it might, I don't know, threaten the speckled pygmy sparrow or whatever. Because, of course, if a leftist is good at anything, it's promoting abortion under whatever guise they can possibly promote abortion. $3.6 million for the Michelle Obama Trail. That's in Decatur, Georgia. It's a 3.8-mile trail that connects to, get this, the Barack Obama Magnet School. Wonder who came up with all that. $817,000 for partnerships with justice-involved individuals in Glendale, California. That's what they're actually called, justice-involved individuals. I wonder if that includes all of the Black Lives Matter leaders that are buying up millions of dollars of swanky Beverly Hills real estate. $200 million for a gender equity fund, including to promote gender equality in Pakistan. $1.2 million for centers to support LGBTQ students at San Diego Community College. $105,000 for an LGBTQ youth mentoring program in Pittsburgh. $3 million for the New York Historical Society's American LGBTQ+ Museum Partnership Project. $800,000 is going to be given to a group called In Our Own Voices Incorporated for transitional housing and services for LGBT and gender non-conforming people. By the way, is that a thing? I'm really interested to know, because the left likes to paint this picture that all of these LGBTQ plus people, all of these gender non-conforming people, all of the ones running around with, half-shaved pink hair and calling themselves, I don't know, birds or whatever, they're all like homeless people, and we need to help them with housing because apparently, this is a particular group of people that finds themselves out on the street more often. And I'm kind of over here wondering, okay, is it the fact that you're gay or you're trans that's landing you on the street? Or is it the fact that this is clearly an incident of mental health? We have a mental health problem among our homeless population. We have a mental health and a substance abuse problem among our homeless population. That's been clearly established. Go to New York City or San Diego or Hawaii and just take a look around and you can find that pretty clearly. I think that it's a pretty good indicator that we're dealing with mental health issues among the vast majority of transgender people when they're the ones that are ending out on the streets. So apparently we've got to give gobs and gobs of money to get them off the streets, but we've got to make sure that we target that specific group of people because, of course, we don't care about our veterans that are sleeping under bridges. We've got to make sure that we take care of the transgender and the non-binary people under the overpasses. That's the main concern here. To that end, $856,000 for facilities and equipment for New York City's LGBT Center. This one's fun. $750,000 for the Trans Latin Coalition to help transgender Latinos. Not just transgenders, not just Latinos, transgender Latinos. It's interesting how our little marginalized groups keep getting smaller and smaller. More than $2 million for capital renovation and facility infrastructure upgrades for the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum. Who comes up with this garbage? Serious Blacks in Wax Museum. $2 million for a group called MLK Labor, which is a social and economic justice group to create an online hiring platform. So now we're building websites for social justice groups with taxpayer dollars. All the other things that we could be worrying about, all the problems that the average American is facing, but we're going to help them build a website. Okay, $2.9 million for a zero emissions bus fleet in Illinois, because again, we have to go super green. Stop the cows from farting and all that. $2 million for equitable artificial intelligence in Maryland. Yeah. $3.57 million for San Fernando Gardens Adapting to Climate Change project. And $524.4 million to the National Institutes of Health to deal with minority health disparities. Minority health disparities. Bet you didn't even know that was a thing. But you didn't know who doesn't have to be crippled by health disparities, by the way. You, if you enroll in a Share Healthcare plan. So I'm now partnering with Share Healthcare to let everybody know about this amazing Christian-based alternative to traditional health insurance. This is not health insurance, okay? Share Healthcare is an Affordable Care Act exempt cost-sharing program between people who are sick of the same old insurance plan and all of the headaches that come with them, or those who don't want to subsidize medical costs that do not align with their faith-based values. So, Share Healthcare has individual, couple, and family plans to fit your needs, and get this, okay? The average national cost for health insurance for one person is over $450 a month. But with healthcare programs starting as low as $149 a month, Share Healthcare provides Americans with medical, financial, and religious freedom by offering share cost plans that align with Christian values. So do not wait until the next time that you get screwed over by your insurance plan. If you are tired of closed enrollments, complicated insurance plans, and expensive programs that are happy to take your money but are not there when you need them, go to sharehealthcare.com, enter the promo code MRCTV23, that's MRCTV23, and find a plan that works for you today. Sharehealthcare.com, MRCTV23. It'll be the sanest thing that you have done all week, which is more than I can say for members of Congress who are rubber stamping a $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill this week. The list goes on. The list of absolute insanity in this bill continues. It's mind-boggling to think about what is in this bill that they actually think that you and I should pay for, and that they don't expect us to read or to care about. They think that they're going to actually get away with this. And the sad part is they probably are. But we should know exactly what's in it so that we know just how taken for a ride we are being by people on both the left and the right in those marble halls of Congress. $335 million to prepare for a flu pandemic. Just got over the last pandemic. That was a doozy. Had so much fun with the last pandemic. It was a fantastic test of the American people to figure out just how many sheeple could be controlled. And now we've got to spend $335 million preparing for the next pandemic, which, by the by, if we do have a flu pandemic, it will only be because we absolutely butchered our own immune systems, slapping filthy rags on our faces and shutting ourselves inside of our homes at the threat of government force over the last pandemic. So if your kids are getting the flu, if you have been the sickest that you've ever been this season, I know that our family has been struggling with sickness more this winter than we ever have before. And you cannot tell me that it has nothing to do with all of the shutdowns and the fact that nobody was getting sick for like 2 straight years because we weren't going around each other. And now all of a sudden you walk out your door and you get anything from the sniffles to the flu. So we're going to spend $335 million to prepare for the flu pandemic, including, get this, written in the bill verbatim, necessary surveillance tools. And if that doesn't sound Orwellian, necessary surveillance tools to sort of monitor this flu situation. But trust the government, right? They did such a bang-up job with COVID. What could possibly go wrong? We're also going to spend $7.5 million to study the domestic radicalization phenomenon. You know, that thing that the left likes to point to, where all of the people over on the right with all their conspiracy theories for questioning the government line, that's domestic radicalization. So we need to make sure that we have almost $8 million of taxpayer money to study this phenomenon and figure out how we can combat the misinformation that's radicalizing all of these crazy conservatives. We're also going to authorize monuments to journalists and service animals. Journalists and service animals. I wonder if we're going to pay for statues to go in the place of, like, you know, Robert E. Lee monuments that have been knocked over. We're going to be spending $6 million for Clemson University, $982,000 for motel vouchers in LA, $2 million for improving coordination in the New York City's mayor's office with groups that offer services to families and children. That's not $2 million for government services to families and children, by the way. That's $2 million for the people in the mayor's office to figure out how to better talk with the charities that are providing services to children and families. That's what that is. Of course, if we're going to be spending a whole bunch of money at the New York City mayor's office, maybe we could, I don't know, help him with his rat problem in his townhouse. Just, you know, a thought for starters. Other countries, tons and tons of money going to other countries, including $15 million for Nicaragua and $50 million for Venezuela to fund democracy programs. Democracy programs. Now, I'm sure that the Biden administration would probably tell you that this is in an effort to help stem the tide of illegal immigration. We're just going to dump tons of money into countries that, historically speaking, have not handled money very well. We're just going to kind of hand a blank check over to the government and say, you know what, we're funding democracy. Just sort of teach your people how to think for themselves and everything will be fine and dandy. Here's a bunch of cash. $17.74 million for repairs to the Kennedy Center, which is on top of the more than $27 million in general funding that they're going to get anyway. If you go to the Kennedy Center, by the way, it's not free. You still have to pay for a ticket to get in there. I tried to just say, oh, well, I already paid for this whole entire building. Does that not get me in? Apparently not. $1.3 million for a recommendation for alcohol in the 2025 dietary guidelines. A recommendation for alcohol. I don't need $1.3 million to tell you that in order to deal with all of the pork that is in this bill, you would have to be drunk as a skunk to think that this makes any sense. Some of it's just ridiculous and absolutely insane. Here's some of the most just absolutely asinine stuff in this bill. This is where if you can suspend for a moment the understanding that this is actual money that you and I have had to give to the government just for them to turn around, stab us in the back, and spend it on this garbage. If you can kind of suspend that for a second, this is almost funny when you look at some of this stuff. $100,000 for Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival for Arts Education. I didn't Google that because I was a little afraid in this day and age what would come up for Jacob's Pillow Dance. I almost don't want to know. Another $5 million to the Universal Hip Hop Museum. Didn't even know that was a thing.
And if you don't know, now you know.
But we're funding it. $2.25 million for shoreline equity. $250,000 for the relocation of the Bishop Museum in Hawaii's ichthyology collection. What's ichthyology, you say? It's fish. It's fish. $250,000 to move some fish, which you'd think in Hawaii they'd be able to do for a lot cheaper. $3 million for 3D printed affordable housing using forest-derived materials. We can print houses now. $3 million. $2.4 million for the Connecticut Kelp Innovation Center, $1.5 million for the Pasadena On-Street Dining Project in California, $4 million for soy-enabled rural road construction in Iowa, $385,000 for an inclusive playground in New Jersey, $575,000 for a mobile buffalo meat processing unit in New Mexico. Sounds delicious. Probably still wouldn't pay over $500,000 for it, though. $3 million for bee-friendly highways, or as the government calls them in the spending bill, pollinator-friendly practices on roadsides and highway right-of-way programs. $65 million to restore Pacific salmon populations, over $2 million in improvements and maintenance for the Iditarod Trail. The list goes on and on. This is a fraction, y'all. This is a fraction of the ridiculous nonsense in this spending bill. This is a fraction of all of the stuff that over the years the government has decided, the federal government has decided are within its rights to spend federal taxpayer money on. Nothing in the Constitution encompasses the vast majority of this stuff, if any at all. Nothing in the Constitution states that the federal government should be involved in or should be funding with our money Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival. What is that? Are you kidding me? The Universal Hip Hop Museum? Now, I'm not slamming the Universal Hip Hop Museum. I've never been there. Maybe it's the coolest place on earth. I have no idea. That's not the point. The point isn't whether or not some of these things are good things or bad things, or whether we like them or don't like them. Some of them sound absolutely ridiculous. But as far as I'm concerned, if you want to save the salmon, that's totally fine. I like salmon. Don't want to run out of it. But that's not the federal government's job. Nothing in the powers of the Constitution that are laid out for the federal government, nothing in the founding of this nation and the structure to set up the federal government and what the federal government was meant to do, absolutely nothing at all in the Constitution pertains to any of this mess. But the reason that we have this, the reason that we have all of this stuff, and this is a problem on both sides. This is a Democrat problem. This is a Republican problem. Two sides to the same proverbial coin. The problem is we have a revolving door by which politicians get these earmarks put into these massive spending bills that they know nobody's going to read, including the people that are going to vote on it. The American people aren't going to read it. The vast majority of people aren't going to know the nonsense that's in here. So all of these politicians put their little earmarks in for their little pet projects in their state or in their area to keep those people happy, to keep the politicians and the bureaucrats in that area happy, so that then they turn around and they reelect this yahoo back to Congress, and around and around and around we go. We're not paying for infrastructure in this country. We are not paying for stuff that makes our lives better or improves society. That's not what we're paying for with all of this. What we are paying for in all of this is for politicians to get reelected more easily. That's what we are paying for. All of this stuff is one giant campaign scheme by both sides. When you see all of these little pet projects in here, it has nothing at all to do with the federal government doing its job. All it's about is making sure that the dude who put that line in there for that museum or that project or that street or that trail or that school or that whatever keeps his people happy so that they send his butt back, so that he can continue to be, or she can continue to be, a career politician making buttloads of money off of us. And around and around and around it goes. And what's really interesting is that in all of these little projects, in all of this stuff that we're funding, one of the most hilarious but not funny factors here, if you recall, interesting, that the longest shutdown in United States history was when the government shut down for 35 full days between December 22nd, 2018 and January 25th, 2019. Remember that? 35 full days. I remember that because with my husband being active duty military, we didn't get paid. Because Donald Trump asked for $5.7 billion to help fund a border wall to deal with illegal immigration. $5.7 billion. And Democrats shut down the government because they said it was a waste of money. And yet in the spending bill that we just saw this week, we just spent another $45 billion helping Ukraine defend their borders. Now, I have stated on this show, and I will continue to do so, that I don't necessarily buy the line that we should not be involved in Ukraine at all. I think that Ukraine is a strategic location in Europe. I think that anything that contributes to the expansion of the Russian Empire and the rebuilding of the Soviet bloc is a problem and threatens American interests. I don't have a problem with assisting Ukraine in its defense. I know that that breaks me from a lot of people. There are people that think that we should just bow out altogether. Unfortunately, I think that in a perfect world, America would only worry about America. Other countries would worry about themselves, but we don't live in that world. We live in a globally interconnected world. And so anything that expands Russia's interests, because Russia is not a friend to the United States, would be a problem. So I can see the argument that by helping Ukraine, we are, by proxy, helping ourselves. I understand that. What I don't understand is how we justify sending over $100 billion at this point for Ukraine to defend their borders against an invasion. But $5.7 billion was too much to spend defending our own country against an invasion. And this is a problem that has gotten worse under the Biden administration. We have droves of illegal aliens showing up on our front doorstep, literally thousands upon thousands of them a day, even as this administration is fighting to end Title 42, which is the one stopgap measure that we have to sort of stem this tide. The Biden administration is actively working to end Title 42, and border agents are preparing to deal with over 14,000 illegal aliens a day if Title 42 is ended. This is a problem that this administration, that this White House is actively working to make worse. It is a crisis at our border like this country has never seen. It is so bad that even the leftist media can't ignore it now. MSNBC sent a reporter down to the border, and she was absolutely flabbergasted by the fact that there are now people sleeping on the streets in El Paso, Texas in 30-degree weather because they have just been coming over in massive droves.
Really what we're seeing here is a city that is overwhelmed and in chaos. These families behind me here, these are some of the lucky ones. We're inside a shelter, but a lot of shelters are overwhelmed. I just came from the streets this morning. There are hundreds of people sleeping in the airports, at bus stations, on the streets, and it's actually really cold here. It was 33 degrees when we woke up this morning. Migrants were huddling together under blankets for warmth because even though Title 42 hasn't lifted yet, so many people have been able to come across. Not every nationality gets expelled, but we just spoke to people at this shelter here. Ruben Garcia, who runs this shelter, who says, look, already there are people sleeping on the streets. The numbers that will be sleeping on the streets if Title 42 lifts is unfathomable, and he says the federal government will have to do more. We were even able to see, as of last night, a lot of migrants just crossing, and migrants I spoke to this morning saying they haven't had any interaction with U.S. immigration authorities. They just walked right in.
This is a huge, huge problem. But $5.7 billion was too much to spend to deal with it.
It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with the wall is an immorality between countries. It's an old way of thinking. It isn't cost effective. The wall, in my view, is an immorality. It is, again, a waste of money, an opportunity cost to protect the American people. But it is a diversionary tactic on the part of the president. And now he wants to use the shutdown of government as taking these public employees, and not only them, but the people who are served by them, hostage to his wall.
Why is it that we can find all of this money for the Iditarod Trail and to save the salmon and the Hip Hop Museum and motel vouchers in LA and all of this equity training and diversity garbage and the Michelle Obama Trail and all of this stuff, environmental justice, whatever. We can find $1.7 trillion in spending for all of this mess. But we couldn't spend less than $6 billion protecting our own nation and enforcing our own immigration laws, which every other country in the world has, by the way, but for some reason we're the only country not expected to enforce ours. So don't tell me that Congress needs more money. Don't tell me that we're spending it wisely, that this is all stuff that needs to be funded. What needs to be funded is immigration security at our border. What needs to be funded is a VA that actually helps veterans and service members who come back from war. What needs to be funded is our failing infrastructure. And don't tell me, well, we just need to tax people more so that we can actually pay for all of this stuff. And that's what Joe Biden's trying to do, is build back better. But we don't have the money for it. You don't have the money for it? Why not take it from the San Fernando Gardens Adapting to Climate Change project? I don't understand how you can say that we don't have the money for all of this important stuff when you're funding the Connecticut Kelp Innovation Center. That's bullcrap. That's bullcrap. And it is a fair question to ask why we are funding security for other countries' borders when we can't find a few dollars to fund our own. So in that vein, that's the Brittany Hughes Show for this Thursday, you guys. Make sure you head over to sharehealthcare.com, as I mentioned earlier in the show. Sharehealthcare.com. Use the promo code MRCTV23. Find a plan that is right for you. If you are sick of traditional insurance companies, if you're sick of trying to sort through all of the convoluted benefits, if you're sick of trying to figure out whether something is covered or not, go to sharehealthcare.com. MRCTV23 is the promo code. Find a plan that works for you or you and your spouse or you and your family that aligns with your Christian values so that you're not subsidizing a whole bunch of mess that you don't agree with and so that you can get the coverage that you actually need. Also, make sure you head over to Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button on the Brittany Hughes Show. That way you won't miss an episode. We'll just send you a little ding when one is up, and that way you can go ahead and download it, listen to it on your drive to work or whatever. Also subscribe to the Newsbusters podcast while you're over there. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Tim Graham breaks down the latest in media bias. I hope you have a fantastic Christmas. Merry Christmas to you and to your family. I will see you back here next Thursday. God bless.